I'm pleased to introduce our guest, Jerry Cahn, who, in addition to being trained as a psychologist and attorney, launched Age Brilliantly, an interactive community to empower adults of all ages to lead fulfilling 100-year lives. Jerry, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff, and welcome everybody. Let me just switch screens so that we can see the presentation. There we go. Can you see it? Everything up?
I see it.
Great, that's great. So let me explain one thing before we get started, everybody. The goal for me is to use the virtual capabilities of technology to enhance and augment what we do. So years ago, we did webinars where one person would talk to a group of 100. You couldn't see the 100, and it was like talking into an audience and hoping that someone's listening. When I speak, as you've seen from the handouts that you received, my goal is to create an interactive workshop. So I'm going to ask you all to put your cameras on so I get to see you. And when we go through the two exercises that I've set up, I'd like to first call on those who I can see. So let's start there. And it's an opportunity. You're here in part to learn and listen, but mostly to learn. So if you want to listen, get a radio. We've passed beyond that, so let's go to that. So with that, let me kind of get us started. Um, we're focused on the concept of what is your legacy is where this all started many years ago as we started talking to clients about that. And again, being a lawyer and a psychologist, we're all focused on where purpose will take us, etc. But doing it, we've realized that we're missing some really important points. And so I'm going to kind of inspire you, I hope, to see where you can take it to the next level. And let's see, one thing we didn't check, there we go, is to be able to understand the thinking behind it. So what I like to do very often is to make a point that what we should accomplish by the end of tonight is a sensitization to where you want to change your life in the future and make a better impact on other people and on yourself, and focus on how your legacy becomes that method. And I start then with a case of a point that's very rare, and that's the case of Alfred Nobel, who actually is one of those rare people that we know a lot about who changed his legacy. So for those of you who've heard about him, let's go back to what you almost didn't hear. Okay, Rosie, we hear you, and thank you very much. I appreciate that. So let's go understand something. So he's in 1833, he's born, he lived for a good 60 years, and during that period of time, he is a Renaissance person, chemist, inventor, entrepreneur. He wrote dramas, poetry, etc. He filed 355 patents, an issue we'll talk about a little bit later in a completely different concept. What he did is he noticed that there was a thing out there called nitroglycerin, and that if you took it and shaped it, you could produce rods, and you could put them into mountains for mining. And instead of people constantly using their hammers to be able to, and their axes to be able to do the mining, it was an ability to be able to make a lot of a difference in the work you were doing quicker. And so what he did is he introduced that, and it became known as dynamite. And he was well known during that period of time for having really helped advance construction, bridges, of roads, tunnels, etc., that could go through different areas using dynamite. What he did not think about, and that's one of the things about everything we do, we don't think of everything, is that it could also be used to make bombs, cannons, and rockets for wars. He had a habit that I don't have, but I've learned to respect it, and that is that every Sunday morning read a newspaper and read about obituaries. One day he opens up the obit column and he reads about the fact that somebody by the name of Alfred, okay, has just passed and he is better known as the Merchant of Death. And he reads it and he realizes they're talking about him. Turned out his brother had died. And so he contacted the people and let them know, oh, you got the wrong person. And with that, they had to do a retraction. He's alive, but then wrote about his brother. But at that point, he realized, oh my God, If I didn't know what I now know, that would have been my legacy. I'm the merchant to death. That is not why I've worked all my life, filed 355 patents, try to change the world, try to improve things. So he rethought it out. He created a will and he bequeathed a fortune to a foundation that eventually is known as the Nobel Foundation and is producing once a year awards in a number of major categories, including the ones he was concerned with, which included chemistry, literature, physics, etc. And so when I meet people all the time and I say, what do you know about the Nobel Prize? They all have an idea of what he is and what he did, except that isn't what he would have been had he not known. And that's the lesson for all of us. We're not sure what our legacies are going to be. And so we need to be able to think about it. So I want to basically do what I do as a teacher is start, let's define terms and take it along and see where we're going with that. So what I'm going to cover today is what is a legacy, who creates them, okay, what are some of the different approaches you can do to create your legacy? What do you personally want to do with your legacy, which is what we're going to spend a lot of time at the end on, and then strategies for delivering both intangible and tangible um, legacies. So what's my working definition of what a legacy is? It's the influence that you have, the impact that you deliver based on your value system. So think about, again, Alfred. His value is to help people and advance science and use science to help grow society better. And that's what he wanted to be known for and eventually was. But it got misinterpreted. That's why paying attention to how people understand communication is so important. So it's based on your values, your life purpose, and whatever you're passionate about. In this case, science is his passion. It can be directly or indirectly. So his first understanding of his legacy was indirect. Then it became something that was direct. We'll see that. It can be done not as most people start, what is the legacy you're leaving after death? Why can't it be done during death? Which is kind of where Age Brilliantly is all about. Why should I put off fulfillment for when I'm 50 to 100 when I could probably start at 20 and when I become an adult? And that's our whole point. So it's done while you're alive, when you're dead, or both. And the final part is it's done to people. Most of us think of our legacy for our family, but it's also our causes, our charities, our movements, and anything that we care about. It includes tangible assets like property and money, which but you need to work with advisors to have good wills, trusts, and endowments. And it's also intangibles, the values we communicate every day as parents, in training and mentoring, etc. And in fact, as I was putting this together, one of my people stopped me and said, you know, you've been doing that all your life. So I run a program called Mentoring Internships. I've had over 650 interns. I think we've had 5 or 6 this summer. I screen 6 people out for every person that I take. And most of them are all qualified, just wrong place to work. I don't do, I'm not an accountant, so we don't focus on accounting or something like that. But it's important to understand at every given moment, we can have an impact by being a great role model. So what I would like to do now is I'm going to ask you to do this in 2 things. Open up your handout, and the very first page is a simple question. What's your legacy? What I'd like everybody to take a few minutes thinking about, I'll give you 2 minutes, come up with 5 values that you want to leave to whomever you've decided you want to leave it to. Is it your children? Is it your relatives? Is it a church? Whatever it is. And how do you want to actually leave that legacy to that person? So I'm going to stop for 2 minutes and let you do 2 things. One, write down your ideas for what you want to do. And 2, I'm going to ask you to, at that point, also open up your camera so I can call on you and let's just hear what some other people's thinking about when they're thinking about having a legacy. So it's up to you now. right? What I'm going to do is start, Jeff. I'm going to actually start with you if you'd like, so that you can kind of set the tone. Give me one value that you want to leave, that you want to see actualized, to whom and how.
I didn't think of a to whom. I think it should be the world, that I just have kind of a non-discriminatory, uh, diversity, equity, inclusion type of legacy. And then I have concern for the environment. And I'd like to impart those to not just family, but friends and the world. And the how, I guess, would be to write about it. I'm going to have to write something that that will outlast me, I would think.
Excellent. So that's it. Then you've got exactly the kind of formula that I'm looking for. What it is you want to do, the more specific, the better. And writing, and again, many different ways is how you can do that. Okay, and with that, let's move on. Cheryl, how about we jump to you? Gonna go back and forth on different people. Pick a value.
Okay. All right. I have Christian values: being kind, sharing with others, caring for others, serving people, and valuing people.
The wonderful one. And to whom do you want to leave that to?
Now, when I think of leaving that, I'm thinking about just being an example for my children and grandchildren.
Excellent. So it's kind of being a role model, right?
Yeah.
That's terrific. And that's your how, being a role model. Excellent. Terry, how about you?
Hi, I wrote down several. One I wrote down is historic preservation, which is something I am personally involved with at different levels and that I care a great deal about. Um, Another is education, not terribly refined, but education broadly. I
Okay,
also wrote
let's
down.
just take those two.
Okay.
Who's your target that you want to leave historic preservation to, and education? Who are you aiming at?
I'd say for historic preservation, I live in Hoboken, New Jersey, which does have a good deal of 19th century structures, and it sort of creates a theme here. And I'm aware of it also in Manhattan, of course, and elsewhere. But so I first wrote community, meaning my narrow geographic community. But then I also wrote national, because I'm a member of the Historic Trust, which is a national organization. So I feel that it's something that's out there, but not necessarily well publicized as an issue.
And right now, as part of the National Trust, that's how you're leaving that one. Is that through your actions, or is that through finances, or writing, or speaking? What's the single biggest way you deliver it?
I would say for national, I would say finances, and it's very small, but I do an annual donation there.
Perfect. Okay. Carolyn.
So I would just have a question on Terry's, because it's like, is historic preservation, like, is that, what's behind that? What's the value to me? What's the value behind that? Is it, don't forget what our forebears did, or is it don't forget people even if they're dead, or is it, what is the motivation? I'd be curious.
Well, I think it is those things. It is certainly be aware of your predecessors here in the community, or your predecessors if you go to a presidential home, which I have a pretty good collection of those under my belt, or Williamsburg, Virginia, etc. So there are places that you go and you get, I think, inspired. Historic Philadelphia, inspired about the founding of this democracy.
Yeah. Well, I picked one thing I wrote down is a little less serious, but it's actually kind of like the value of fun, the value of really enjoying life, you know. And I think a lot of people, we get mired down in our problems and the seriousness in the world. But and as far as how I communicate that or how I do that, or one way is like my in writing, I do some writing and I try to always have that point of view, are my best pieces anyway. I try to have some humor in it. And so, you know, so to kind of transmit, you don't have to look at everything just straight on, it's serious, it's horrible. And I also, in terms of events, that's another way, like say a party that's kind of different or fun or has aspects that are fun. And I'd like to maybe do more like a bigger event, maybe a community event that again has that element as part of it.
Excellent. Pepita, how about you share with us?
And I see a hand raised.
All right, I unmute it now. In terms of values, I want to transmit or leave behind this is mostly for my grandkids, a moral compass. I want them to have a moral compass to behave ethically. That's one. And then our ancestry. I want them to know where we came from. I want them to know about our roots. And for that, I am writing legacy letters and short stories about the people who preceded us. And then I'd like them to be compassionate human beings, to have respect for others, and treat all people equally. What else did I say? Let me see.
No, that's okay. That's okay. You did fine. You're doing terrific. Compassion. I love that. I love that. I'll take one more person. Just want to get a little bit from everybody because we're going to come back to this, as you've seen from the handouts. So we'll come back to this a little bit. I'm just going to
You
go
see
with
the
who
hand?
got their screens on. Who's got their hand up? I don't see that. I'm focused
Karen.
on pictures.
Karen.
I'm going to
Karen, you
unmute
got
myself.
it, Karen. You're up.
Okay. Yeah, me. Hi.
Hi.
So yeah, I'm going to say about family history and to my kids, and then how specifically, obviously by telling them, but also I have a video. My aunt had did a recording of my grandmother, their whole experience in the Holocaust. So I've just turned that over from a video to a DVD, but I've also put it, it's now, well, it's not a flash drive, whatever. Bottom line, they have a copy of it now. So I'm making sure they both have a copy on their computer. And also the original immigration papers and stuff like that, sharing all that stuff with them. So yeah, somebody else, Carolyn, had said something about fun, and I guess to who that would be mostly well, my kids, yeah, for sure. But where I apply it the most is actually my favorite sport is water skiing. Before anybody goes out for their water ski run, I always say have fun. So that's like my MO. I say have fun. And then the last one I came up with was, I guess, like, I can't remember who said it, Pepita, I think, the concept of compassion. Yeah, I want my kids to be caring and helpful. That some of it is a role model thing. Some of it, you hope that you instill good values in them. I mean, we're done, right? My kids are 25 and 29, whatever they are, they are. So hopefully I instilled good values in them a while ago.
That's terrific. You know something? A round of applause for everybody here. This is great. This is terrific. You all deserve it. That's great. Great values, great concern, and that's really what it's about. As we get older, we need to be able to make a difference in the world. So one of the things I try to do is try to understand what we're doing. So there's a concept called the infinite game and the finite game. Very interesting because the Bible talks about a finite game. Let us eat, drink, and tomorrow we die. So it comes to an end. That's it. It's all about us. Okay. And I think before, when the question was asked, why are you doing this? You're doing it for yourself or other people. It is a very important part of doing it. However, the infinite game is where Age Brilliantly is all about. And you're looking at it from the point of view of life being abundant, and it keeps going on. And you measure yourself not by winning or losing, but by the progress you're making to whatever your common purpose is. And so we talk about being part of a 200-year window of influence. In other words, all of us grew up having a vision of what aging means based on watching our parents and our grandparents, who, by the way, picked their vision of it from their parents and their grandparents. So we kind of figured go back maybe almost 100 years before we get started. I know for me, I grew up as a kid and my grandmother's mother was still alive. She was the only one who survived the Holocaust and came to America. And that was my image of what aging might be like. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, our world is not our world of our parents and grandparents, but it's actually our children and our grandchildren. And that what we need to do is take a look at that. And that's one of the reasons we talk about the fact that you're going to live about 100 years, because as science has now come out through projections, about 3 years ago, they came up with a projection that kids born today will live on average 103 and 104. So that's the world, and try to think about how different that world will be like. And as we age into it, we have a choice of adapting to the world that we came from or we're going to. And our recommendation is go to where you're going to. And a great example of that, some of you may be familiar with, is Maslow, who talks about, and that's a big part of Age Brilliantly, is living a fulfilling life. He's talked about the original code of 5 stages, and it's a little triangle to the left side, where we start off dealing with the basics like physiological needs. And once as a child, for example, that's met, then we want to be safe. We want to be loved by other people. We want to have esteem that becomes self-esteem ultimately. So it's not other people loving us, but we loving ourselves. And ultimately, he said the goal of life is self-actualization. Set up a goal to be the best person that you can be. When he died a couple of years ago, his widow, asked somebody to come to his house and go upstairs where he had his office and basically take his papers and organize them. In doing that, he discovered something. Maslow changed his own model. And that's the point. We move to the future, always looking at our own future. And what he realized is there is one step beyond self-actualization. And as I teach now, this is really the ultimate step. And he calls it self-transcendence. In other words, exactly where Jeff started, what impact are we making on the world in terms of environment, in terms of DEI, in terms of all the things that we're doing, the impact we're having on our children and grandchildren? That's self-transcendence. And so that's really the new hierarchy. And as we raise our children, we want them to be an integrated, holistic, and we set the goal of 100 years because it makes us realize how much time we have in front of us if we use it well to make a difference. And that's where we're going. And so that becomes the prospect of where we want to take our lives. And what's really interesting is that there's a book out that's called Are You a Good Ancestor? And it's a story of Jonas Salk, who, as you probably all know, created the first successful and safe polio vaccine. And what's really interesting is that after years of working on it, his goal was really simple: to change the way people live. And that meant getting rid of polio. So he chose actively not to patent it. Think about what happened when we had COVID. Everyone was out, how do I get the rights to do it? And we have 2 major players, Moderna and Pfizer. He's doing exactly the opposite. I want to help humankind. I want to make a positive legacy on it. And so he becomes what Roman calls the good ancestor. He's looking at what impact can I have on the world? And he started it off with that very positive concept of what difference can I make? What's important for us to also understand is that our positive influence is one thing we may want to do, but we need to pay attention to all of our behaviors. And for those of us who remember, Harry Chapin had a great song called Cats in the Cradle. And in Cats in the Cradle, he tells a story about a man who grows into becoming a father. He has a child, and all his life, his son wants to have more and more time from his father, and his father keeps telling him he doesn't have enough time. And when the kid graduates from college, the father's realizing now he's at a time where he really can spend time as an intellectual, maybe relating to him. And he starts calling his son up and saying, hey, let's have time together. And his son is always, just like his father, too busy. And he ends the song with the important note that we all need to pay attention to. What are we doing directly and indirectly? What kind of things are we doing? His son had just grown up like him. My boy was just like me, too busy. And so we need to look at the impact we're having both consciously and unconsciously. And that's really the goal we need to do, is look at the legacy we're leaving. So even if you don't purposefully think about your legacy, the fact of the matter is you're going to have one whether you like it or not. Question is, are you paying attention to make it as good as you can? So what I did is I took a look at a lot of different people who have legacies in different ways, and I decided to see if we could come up with a framework for them. And it's a really simple framework that you're going to see we'll go through. You either do it intentionally or unintentionally. So think of Alfred Nobel. He lived an unintentional legacy he didn't want. Okay, he wanted to make the world a better place, but he gets known as the merchant of death. He then chose to leave a legacy, not while he was alive, but after he died, and that's what leaving is all about, to celebrate people who contributed to humankind. Another example of someone who did both is Bill Gates. So in the early 1980s, for those of us who remember, he created an operating system called Windows, and his goal for Microsoft was to have it on everybody's desk. And that's what he wanted, every desk, every home to be running Microsoft software. That was the intentional legacy he planned on leaving. But after a while, and that's part of living, is we look at ourselves and we should evaluate, am I accomplishing all the things I want to do? Am I having the impact that I want to do? Can I do a better job? And it doesn't matter how old you are or not how old you are to do that. It's just to ask the question, constantly reviewing it. We call the DEAR process. We design a plan, you evaluate it, you analyze it, and then you review what you're doing and change it. And he did. And he created then with his wife the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to address large social issues, because he realized he could do that now. He had the power, the money, etc., which he didn't have when he was a college graduate, college dropout, rather. Parents are probably the third category all of us can identify with, as being A, having had parents, and B, maybe being a parent, is that we have intentional, but the intentionals generally are tangible things, okay? So think about it, you have money, you have possessions, you want to leave them to people. That's part of that legacy. The irony is the unintentional is usually a legacy that's dealing with ethics, with charity, and with the other behaviors. And we need to pay attention to it. And that's why I found the Cats in the Cradle story very interesting, because he wasn't paying attention to that one because he was working really hard to produce the intentional tangibles. And it's not about that. What it's really all about is making a difference by playing it out in a different way. So what we really have, if you think about it then, is two different options that we can do. We can either live a legacy or leave it. Well, traditionally, and it's really a shame that you're going to notice that traditionally the approach most people have done is like he did. I'm going to leave my legacy. He didn't see building dynamite as living a legacy. He's going to leave a legacy. And the leave of a legacy has been the history of mankind. And that's how we refer to it. And in fact, there's a book I just recently took out and just shared with one of my interns called Mobituaries. And it's from a columnist who actually works with CBS Magazine and does other things, who focuses on reading of people's obituaries. That's what he does. And he calls it the Mobituaries. and he talks about the impact people have. What you'll notice is these are some people you may or may not recognize them, so I'll just give you a feeling for who some of them are. And obviously, with millions and billions of people out there, everyone at some level is leaving or living a legacy. These left them, and I thought were kind of interesting to show something about. So the woman on the left is Doris Duke, who created Women's Wear Daily. Notice how nicely she's dressed. The middle one is Ray Kroc's wife, Joan Kroc, who's a big sponsor of the Salvation Army. And to her right is someone you all probably have heard of in a different way, Charles Avery Fisher, Avery Fisher Hall. Okay, so we're all familiar with that. On the bottom are people that you've heard of in many different ways, John D. Rockefeller, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and J. Paul Getty, all of whom have left foundations, movements, and things like that. They've been focused on leaving their legacy. So I decided let's pick people who are not doing that. And what's interesting is the first observation all my interns pick up on is how come all of them have black and white pictures, and the second one they're all color pictures. And that's the point about time. Time changed. And so you see that much more in there, and obviously it's important to see that. On the left-hand side, and listen to what their charities or foundations are all about. Cindy Campbell, who focused on children with cancer. Malala Yousafzai, who focused on education for women, even though she was hunted down for doing that. You have Judith Heumann, who focused on disabilities and was a major player in the American Disabilities Act in getting it done. I picked the soup kitchen because that's what most of us can do. It's something we can do to help the homeless, to help the people. We can all do that when you get started. If you think of Tony Robbins, who's an incredible person in so many ways, his story is just a really wonderful story about being poor and literally sleeping in a bathtub. And it's how he tells the story. And then one day, because he didn't have the good fortune of money when he grew up, someone brought him a Thanksgiving dinner, and that changed the way he looked at the world. And now he takes advantage of feeding over 1 billion people as he's fed as a way of showing giving back again. On the bottom, you have Ted Turner, who, as you know, all left billions of dollars to the United Nations, hoping it would really bring peace. I think we all would like to see that. Our youngest member, and even though she's below our normal age of an emerging adult, she's only 18 now, Greta Thunberg, who's focused on why are you messing up our world? Let's create a world that's better, and trying to mobilize her age group, which is basically Gen Z, and I think it's a wonderful thing that she's done. And we've actually introduced On Age Brilliantly, which, by the way, you're all welcome to join. It's free. And we do these kind of webinars. This particular one is one we do. It's not a webinar workshop. We do every Tuesday at 1 o'clock, and you're welcome to attend any one. So just go register, see what they are, and come. We've got one. Today's was on mind mastery, and next one actually it's a similar theme that Jeff was mentioning. Start a business at any age on your own terms and how you do it. So for those of you who are doing it, one of our heroes is a person by the name of Earl Futz, who at 92 launched his business called Harissa, which is a Moroccan spice, which is in 600 stores, including Yankee Stadium. So there's a lot of great stuff that people are doing. Next to Greta is Jane Goodall, who's obviously focusing on nature and people and animals and stuff like that. And historically, there's been so much to educate us all to what's happening. And finally, Paul Farmer, who's dealing with healthcare in places that we don't often think about, that are really needing it, and providing funding for those kind of healthcare issues. My poster child for living the third category, which is not leaving or living, but both, is Jimmy Carter. Okay, Jimmy Carter has probably made more positive impact on the world after being a president, but that was what he all had. I have one life and one chance, and he's going to make a difference in what the world, and that's what he did, and he really did. He tried to bring peace. He brought, again, the first in the Mideast, the first peace conference that really took place that made a difference. And then he continued teaching Sunday school into his 90s. And here's an example of a place where he worked, Habitat for Humanities, helping build homes. And he and Rosalind have been working together. As you know, Rosalind recently died, and he's right now under care. And amazingly still alive, which is really a testament to how wonderful a person he is. Some of the other people that I have, and I'm just doing this to inspire you all. So on the bottom left is Charlie Munger, who just passed in the last year. Was a partner in '96 with Warren Buffett, who's the top left, who's still alive, but aging, unfortunately, very quickly right now. Norman Lear, who's over 100, and Mother Teresa. Okay, these are people who are living their things. And just to give you an example, Charlie Munger's left parts of his billions-dollar fortune to a number of organizations. And it turns out in researching him, I discovered his goal was to be an architect, not a financial investor. And he only got to where he is because somebody invited him to dinner. And Warren Buffett happened to be there, and they clicked really well. So when he leaves money basically to universities for libraries and dormitories, one of the rules is he has to be involved with the architects in building the building that he's leaving the money for. And so it's a great example of combining the two. We all know Oprah. In the middle of there are Millard and Linda Fuller, who started Habitat for Humanity and still run it and really doing great. Obviously, Princess Diana, we all know. Then on the left-hand side, you have Ace Greenberg. Maurice was his real name, who used his financial fortune from insurance to create the Star Foundation to service a lot of people. Below that is Tarana Burke, who started the Me Too movement. For those of us who did not know that. Paul Allen, who is Bill Gates' partner and used his money in many different ways because of his own personal illness that he had and made you think about it. And finally, Muhammad Yunus, who created the Grameen Bank, a way of helping people help themselves by providing seed funding to doing it. I could have chosen a lot. It's enough for you to get a good feeling for people. We can all do that. We can all make a difference. The second kind of criteria that I'm kind of looking at beyond the living or leaving is that whether we make it a thing that is public or not public. What's real interesting about Charles Feeney is he built an $8 billion industry creating in airports the capability of buying things that were tax-free. All of those things were his. And he used that fortune and gave it out to charities and universities and foundations during his life anonymously. Nobody knew he was the funder. Jeffrey Holt was a retired caretaker. You see him there taking care of something in a mobile park that he didn't bother telling anybody. He was also worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and he donated the money under a private arrangement to the city as part of what he did. So some people do it to get claim and fame. The Bill Gates Foundation is all about him in one way, but he's also using it as a way of being a magnet. So he's not about his own personal ego, but he's about trying to, how do I get other people to give money? And they've all signed what's called the Giving Pledge to donate 50% more to charity. Just recently, literally in the last 2 weeks, that's what I love about this. I'm constantly getting new news about this. Bill Gates left, and I'm sorry, Warren Buffett gave him another couple billion dollars rather to donate. And the people involved have been Bloomberg and Zuckerberg and Brin, which is Google, etc. So people are constantly doing it. Again, in the last 2-3 months, out of nowhere, there was an announcement here in the city that the Albert Einstein College of Medicine had just received money, $1 billion, which actually came from her husband, who had been accumulating that because he had worked as an advisor for Berkshire Hathaway. Warren Buffett again, helping people. And with that money, he gave it to her and said, you give it away as you please. And she's decided to do that. In the last week, you may all know, Bloomberg just donated another $1 billion to Johns Hopkins. He's already contributed 4.5 billion for education, also for medical school to be able to do it. So there are many ways that you can do it. The key question here, which is why I do this with you, is to ask you, what are you going to do and how are you going to do it? So the questions that when we all have to ask is, what are the values we want to be known for? What impact do we want to have? And the point there is, general won't work, specific will. And that's why bequeathing is so important to it. Who do you want to impact? Is it your family? Is it your community? Is it your profession? Is it your philanthropic? Is it charitable? Is it a cause, environmental, sustainable? Really think it through. And again, keep in mind that you are role models to your children, to your community. And whatever legacy you decide to live and leave, you're going to make it directly from you, but indirectly through them. And when are you going to do it? And I can't think of anything more pleasant than being able to do it. So that brings us to our second sheet. So I'd like you to take out the second one. We actually increased it. We said 5 to 10 values. I'm going to say write down 7. I'm going to give you another 2-3 minutes. You can take the ones you've already done and build on them and add a few more. What's the legacy gift? To try to be a little bit more specifically in that, what's the legacy? That's your value. Who's your recipient? Try to aim it at a more targeted audience. So it might be in your community. It might be people who are part of a historic center from things that you've said, etc. When and how. What I'm really going to look for is, how are you going to live it now, if you can, or are you just going to leave it? And why is it important to you? Well, you didn't really ask that question a lot. That was a great question that Karen had asked of somebody, of Terry, and I think that was great. Why is this important to you? Because even if you put your name on it, the Ford Foundation is about Ford making a change and a difference in the world. But the point is, he does that in many different ways. One of the, as you're taking a minute to do this, and then we'll go around again and ask people to share their information. It's important for you to understand that I think one of the wonderful living things that Henry Ford did beyond the foundation is he made a decision when he was, so the Ford Motor Company that we all know is actually his third Ford company. The first two failed. So that's why entrepreneurship is so important. You can learn new things and learn how to do it better. And one of, I think, the strongest things that he did was not just build the factory, but he also figured out how to get the price of a car down to, are you ready for this? $5, which was what a person could earn in a month during that period of time. And by doing that, he felt his workers could buy the cars and would take greater pride in producing those cars. And he made it possible for them to buy the cars. And that was, I think, a very much of a living legacy that Henry Ford had. So I'm going to let you write a couple of things down and I'll just start. You can continue writing as you're doing it, but that'll give us what we're doing. So how about Carolyn, we start with you. Pick one and share it with us. You're on mute.
This was something, this is sort of another, based on another value, and it's kind of like copying something that one of my churches did. Basically, the value is basically like kindness or just, okay. And this was a minister at this church I was in, and he started an award at a school, like an elementary school. So like 8th grade, when the kids graduated, everybody wins, there's always these academic awards and these athletic awards, but he started basically a good, I forget what he called it, but basically a good kid award.
Right.
So the teachers would nominate and pick a kid who maybe wasn't the smartest, maybe wasn't the most athletic, but he was kind, helpful. He had character, a kid with character. And I thought that was a great idea. I mean, how much impact that could have on a person who maybe isn't that smart or maybe isn't excelling in other ways that school usually recognizes. So I was thinking, do something like that. at
I
some,
think that's wonderful. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Karen?
Hi, sorry, I'm gonna keep going on the Holocaust, the educating my kids, the family history one, because I'm gonna answer your part about why is this so important? Because I don't want it to happen again. It's quite simple. And I mean,
It's never again, right?
it's quite simple. They need to know about it. People are forgetting, you know, because there's nobody alive, you know, so few people alive now who went through it. So I've always thought that it was so crucial that my kids go to whatever, Sunday school, whatever, that they just needed to know.
I think that's great. I'm sure you're aware Dr. Ruth just died, and she went through that obviously, and Israel and tried to help. That's wonderful. Terry, you sitting back? I'm gonna grab you. No time here. You know we got to do things. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I touched on the historic preservation, and I have been on a museum board here in Hoboken. And I'm not on it now, but I'm a contributor, and occasionally I lead walking tours of areas here so that particularly newcomers or younger people coming into the community get to see what we have. So that's more local than the National Trust, which is national, to whom I contribute. On education, which I mentioned briefly, I have basically contributed to my two different universities for years. I even contribute to my high school, although that's a public institution, so tax supported, but they have some good programs in the scholarship realm. So it's a little less direct than I'd like, but at least I know the money's out there and being put to good use. And
That's
that
great.
may show up in estate planning, but I'm not that far along yet.
Well, never put it off. We'll talk about that in a few minutes because you never know what's going to happen. Pepita.
Yeah, I veered off from my from my grandchildren to as something that's more local. I live in Richfield Park, New Jersey, which used to be a very white Anglo-Saxon community, and it's now much more multicultural. And there are a lot of elders here, and now there are a lot of young families. And I've actually proposed this. The value is generosity, giving time and expertise. And it would be between seniors and young families who both have to work and don't have the extra help at home. They can't pay for extra help. So, and seniors tend to be very isolated and alone. So I've actually proposed it very generally to our Board of Commissioners. And it's this exchange of time and expertise to create a multi-generational, multi-ethnic community that is generous back and forth between seniors and I guess families with children, and they don't have the means to have those children taken care of. And it becomes the end part is that it will become a part of the village. It's called a village, the village government, that at some point it will just function because the government has decided to be generous.
I think that's great. And I think intergenerational work is the thing that we're finally getting back to, and we should be there. Let me continue. You've all been terrific. So 2 ways you can leave it that on your own that you may or may not be aware of. There is a program from NPR. You can hear it. They have it almost every Friday. It's called StoryCorps. And
Oh yeah, love it.
StoryCorps, it's a nonprofit that lets people tell stories of how they relate to each other, meaningful conversations. It's actually recorded in the Library of Congress. So if you really want to hear and share with other people, it's a great place to go. They've had 700,000 people already do it. And then there's another program. It's called Storyworth. And what that is, actually, my son gave it to me as a gift. That's kind of how I knew about it. I mentioned it to him, and then he gave it to me for my birthday. He said, "Dad, this is great. Every week you're going to get a question from me, and you're going to give me an answer, and we put it into a book." and we take that book and we'll publish it at the end. And so every week I get one. I have right now a question from last week and this week I have to catch up on. And I find it fascinating because it's brought us so close together, because I tell them things that I would never have thought about asking about. It's $100 a year and you get a printed book and you can share it. And I can't recommend it highly enough because
I don't know. Have
more
you
highly.
seen the printed book? It's beautiful. I have a writing partner in a writing group. His children gave him that, and he brought us a book. And it's fascinating. It's wonderful.
Isn't it? It's great. So
Yeah.
it's something really to do. I've given it away as a gift to a lot of people as well. It's a bargain. Actually, I'm in my second year doing it, just to make a point.
Ah, so you know the book already. Yeah.
Yeah. Third is, you're all about purpose, which is obviously fundamental to all of us. If you're interested, there's a course, it's a company called On Purpose, where you fill out it basically kind of an exam, and based on that, you know your purpose and find your power by getting it down to 2 words. Ingeniously fast might be one, forever meaningful is another, poured wisdom is a third. It's different things. It's called onpurpose.me. Highly recommended. It's something I think you'll find very interesting, finding out who you are as we go through it. So to put it all together and keep us on time, Jeff, let me just sum it up. What Age Brilliantly is all about is don't put it off. Start as early as you can and make a difference in the world by leading a fulfilling 100-year life, and set that as your target. You all have that potential. So the real question you have is, if you're now 62, you got 38 more years, how are you going to use that time well? And that means live intentionally. Start identifying your key values so you can live and leave your legacies. Start with joining Age Brilliantly and find out what we do and how we do it, and take advantage of our programs. As I said, the Explore series that's every Tuesday at 1 o'clock are free. So you can't lose with that. Notice what other people are doing. Pay more attention. I'm not going to read really obits yet, but I know I pay attention to them more than I ever have before, and I listen, and I love what people say about what they're doing. It's a great way to be inspired. At Age Brilliantly, we have over 100 trailblazers, people like Henry Kissinger, who, at 100, were meeting with President Xi and not thinking I'm too old. Okay, thinking that I want to make a difference in the world, and still doing it, and getting an interview with President Xi when Biden got turned down. Focus on estate planning documents. It'll make a big difference to what you're doing. If you're going to do things that are tangible, get a financial planner to help you with your finances, get a lawyer. Just remember that if you don't have a will and a trust to take care of what you want to do, it gets run, especially in New York and other states like that, it goes into intestate. It could take 1 year to 2 years before it's all resolved. You're not helping anybody, you're leaving your money too. It's a really important issue to do that. And finally, for all of us, let's be trailblazers and role models for our kids, families, employees, colleagues, community, because we can make a difference. And if you ever want to receive a free half-hour legacy plan consultation, just let me know. We're glad to help you out. And with that, Jeff, I think they now know how to live and leave a great legacy.
Yes. Well, thanks so much, Jerry.